again. This is Keith Leitner. Oops, I mean, Transformation Jones here, TJ to all my friends, with the second video in the series of TJ's guide notes. I've got a new addition to the studio here. I don't know how many of you out there are fans of The Big Bang Theory, but I'm a big fan of it and just always get the biggest kick out of Dr. Sheldon Cooper's Fun with Flags episodes and his white screen in the background, and thought, you know what, maybe we need to have a white screen in the background here. So in today's episode, we're going to be uh, dealing with changing human behavior. And so for those of you that watched the first episode, in the first episode, I introduced everyone to my new book, The Journey, that came out a little bit earlier this year, and also introduced everyone to Transformation Jones, or TJ here, and went through an overview of the book, kind of talked about the two major parts of it, and then spent some time talking about my personal journey that led to basically the creation of the book. So what today I want to do is I want to start moving into some of the parts of the very first half of the book. So the first half of the book, you remember I talked about just the human dynamic in organizations and human behaviors and so forth. So for episode number 2 here, I want to talk about changing human behavior. And for those of you that have been involved in any type of organizational transformation in the past, when you hear or read changing human behavior, it might have like given you the willies a little bit. Maybe the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, or it sent a chill down your spine, because we all have those horror stories about changing human behavior. I don't know, there's something about that phrase that doesn't give the best response to people. What's funny about that is, and that's the topic, and that's the main points that we're going to get across in this video today. What's funny about that is if I change the words around a little bit and say it differently, and if I say that this video is about human behavior changing, it wouldn't have any of those same responses. It would be more of a, well, okay, I wonder what part of human behavior that's changing that he's going to be talking about today. Because we all understand that human behavior does change. But when you say changing human behavior, it almost automatically starts to give you those bad feelings. And so why? There's a really popular saying out there. I've heard it a million times in my life, probably. And it's that people resist change. I hear it all the time. Change is hard because people resist change. People resist change. Well, I'm here to tell you, people don't resist change. People resist being changed. And if you understand that subtle difference, it makes all the difference in change management. We as human beings, we make changes all the time for ourselves. We may change the way that we get ready in the morning. We may change the directions that we take to get to work or to get to the store or whatever destination we're going to. We may decide to start a new eating regimen, and eating healthier or eating more proteins or whatever, and we make those changes ourselves, and there's no stress there, there's no resisting there. We don't resist those changes because we're changing ourselves. However, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, you know what, TJ, you're going to have to cut out on some of those sweets, then it's being changed, and it has a very different feel to it. So if organizational change is the objective, if organizational change is the need, if lean is something that you're trying to deploy within your organization, that's by definition going to involve change. I like to say that I'm pretty sure it's Einstein that's given credit for the quote. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again, yet expecting different results. If you want or need different results, something has to change. Okay, so change is just by its nature a part of anything that you're doing where you're trying to achieve different types of results. You're trying to improve anything, make anything better. So the challenge then becomes, how do I get those results within my human workforce without forcing the change on them that leads to that change resistance? One of the most interesting stories when you study, human change and human dynamics and human motivation is the Hawthorne study. And a lot of people understand and have heard of the Hawthorne study, or they talk about the Hawthorne effect. And so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. Back in the 1930s, a man by the name of Elton Mayo went to work with a plant in Hawthorne, Pennsylvania. I think it was a Western Electric plant, but don't quote me on that. But he went to work with a plant in Hawthorne, Pennsylvania. And the work that he was doing there was working with them to try to drive improved efficiencies and make things better within their facility. So this organization is looking to try to improve things. And so Elton Mayo is trying to study what are the things that can lead to improvements within the workplace? What are some things that can lead to more motivated employees and so forth? And he's specifically studying or trying to study environmental impacts. So things like lighting and temperature and those types of things. So the part of Hawthorne effect that most people know is that he changed the lighting in the work area and made it brighter to see what kind of an impact that would have, and their performance went up. So obviously lighting is an environmental impact, and so to test his theory, though, he made the lighting significantly darker than it was before, because if making it lighter improved performance, making it darker should decrease performance. And as he made it darker in the work area, strangely, performance improved. Okay, so whether he made it lighter or darker, the performance improved. So that's interesting. So maybe it's not the lighting. Maybe the lighting was affecting the temperature. So he made it warmer in the work area, saying, well, I'm going to make the work area to where the conditions are such that it's 10 degrees warmer in here. Let's see what impact that has on performance. And as he did that, performance improved. Okay, so maybe it wasn't lighting, maybe it was heating. And so that's what was going on. But let me test that. So he changed the temperature to where it was 10 degrees cooler than when they had originally started the study. And once again, performance improved. So no matter what environmental changes were made, their performance improved. So for years, what most people thought was what they learned from the Hawthorne effect was that it was just the fact that someone was paying attention to them. And because of that, performance was getting better. And so I remember back in the 1980s, there was this crazy period of time where people were teaching this philosophy called management by walking around. So just walk around to all of your people and talk to them every day, and that will deploy the Hawthorne effect and improve performance. So, hey, how you doing today? How's your mom? How your kids? Everything working out well? Hey, Jim, what's happening with you today? Because they thought that was what the Hawthorne effect had taught them. It was only years later that people went back and really did a deeper dive into that study. And what they found was when Mayo went to this facility to try to figure out, to test these environmental conditions to improve performance, his first question to them is, well, okay, so how do you measure your performance? We need to have some kind of improvement measure so I can baseline and see what happens. And they were like, well, we don't really have performance measures here. Well, if that's what I'm going to study, then I need to have some way of measuring it. So the first thing he did was he worked with them to create some performance measurement systems. Okay. Then the next thing was, okay, well, we need somebody to measure this so that we can see what kind of an impact it's having. And they're, well, we don't really have anybody to measure that thing that you just created. So he's like, well, okay, well, I'll just get the people that are part of the study to do the measurement. So he created this group of people that were that for once understood in a measurement way what was important to the organization because they didn't know that before. And they in turn were measuring themselves. It just those things alone were driving them to improve their performance. It was as they made changes, they saw the impact of those changes, and as things got better, they reinforced that and they continued down. If things got worse, they modified it and went back. So this team of people measuring themselves is what drove performance improvement. So again, they weren't being changed. They were changing themselves. And that's the key lesson from this. People don't resist change. People resist being changed. One of my favorite examples of this personally. So back about 10 years ago, I started working with an operating room at a hospital on the outskirts of Indianapolis. So this is a pretty good sized hospital. Indianapolis is a big town. And this particular operating room attached to this hospital, they had 12 ORs. They were running procedures in 10 of them. Two of them they weren't actually doing procedures in. And they were losing market share. And this is a part of Indianapolis that should not be losing market share. So they were obviously losing market share because people were choosing to take their procedures someplace else. Either surgeons didn't want to work with the hospital, so they were taking their procedures, or possibly even patients not wanting to have their procedures done at this hospital. So it was pretty much all reputational. And so they set a goal of trying to grow their OR such that they were able to do, accommodate more procedures. It's their mission, as they're trying to improve their mission, do more procedures. And so part of that, the basic blocking and tackling of that, is we wanted it to be an area where it was more friendly to the patient, more friendly to the surgeon, and more friendly to the staff. So we're going to work on improving things in this OR with these 10 different rooms. Well, we obviously can't do all of them at one time. So we started with one room and we pulled a team together so that instead of us changing them, we give them the space and the environment to change themselves. They measure themselves. So this is the Hawthorne effect being deployed in the OR. But we had to start somewhere, so we started with one room. And the individuals that were involved in that one room loved the changes. They were learning quite a bit. It was driving performance the right direction. But there were others, some key individuals within the OR who, because of the nature of the OR, they weren't always the same people in the same room each day. They would move from room to room. And so this room where we targeted the improvements to begin with occasionally had people, staff from other rooms working there, and the changes were immediately resisted because they were being changed. These were things that were different from what they'd been doing in their other room, now being expected to do different here. So the organization was changing them, and so that led to resistance. And unfortunately, there's no way to avoid some of that. But what our plan was to start with one room and one group and then move to another room with another group. So now we've encompassed a larger portion of the staff, and then another room and another group. So little by little, we're going to get to all of the rooms and all of the staff. And a couple of the people that resisted that first room initially, and were pretty vocal about their resistance, as soon as we started working in the room where they spent the majority of their time and they were on the team, they immediately started seeing things like, oh, now we get it. Now we understand. And you know what? We can take what they're doing there and take it another step forward. And each of these rooms had their own measurement board. It was literally pencil and paper outside the room where they were measuring some key things. And so they started driving their own improvement. And it took a little over a year, the work that was done there. But by the time the work was finished, that OR, all 10 of those rooms were doing more on average than one extra procedure per room per day with the same staff in the same time. So it was all of these wonderful things for the organization, better access for the patient, but it was all changes that were being driven by the people themselves. So they weren't resisting the change when they got the opportunity to change themselves. The other thing that I love about that OR is just the environment there and how much it changed during this same time period. The charge nurse in that OR was amazing. Just love her to death. She was incredible. When we started working there, before we got into the first room and started this series of changes, she literally carried 3 phones with her. And it was not uncommon for her to be holding one phone up to one ear, one phone up to the other, and the other one in her pocket ringing. There was just so much chaos that was going on. And that was how she had to handle everything because she was the one that was handling things. But as the teams started making their changes, these changes expanded beyond the rooms into the systems around that. And within, I don't know, 8 or 9 months, she not only got to a point where she didn't even have to carry a phone with her, they'd freed up enough time to where she was starting to train others to be charge nurses. It just calmed the chaos. And it was all because the people were changing themselves. They had an idea of what they needed to be working toward. They had a mission and a vision. We'll talk about that some too. But they were all changing themselves and measuring themselves as they worked things forward. It's amazing when a plan comes together. And that's the first piece, if you will, of understanding humans in a change environment and structuring things to take advantage of this. So the question that I'll pose to you to close things out today is, for those of you who are watching this video because you do have a lean transformation, you're learning more about the lean transformation, or you picked up the journey and you're trying to understand things a little bit more. The question I always ask is, if you feel that change is being resisted, is it because the people are being changed, or have you structured things to where people are given the space, the latitude, the support, and the encouragement to change themselves? So, with that, we'll close number 2, TJ's guide notes, Changing Human Behavior. And I just want to thank you again for joining us on this journey. Again, if you like this video, please click like and subscribe. And if you have thoughts or questions or comments, send them to me, post them. As we move further in TJ's guide notes, I will be more than happy to address some of those as they come in. Thank you very much.